I was a failed pre-med student who now codes for a living. Yeah, two quite different things. And today, I guess I kind of want to share a little bit about that journey, how I got here, and I guess also what I'm hoping to do with this YouTube channel and why I created this YouTube channel. I guess first, let's start with the failed pre-med aspect of all of this. It does sound dramatic, but yes, it is true. I didn't get into med school when I was an undergrad student. At the time, it was devastating. Like, I lack the words to describe what I was feeling at the time. I definitely was low on confidence, but I just remember being so disappointed and just so down on myself that I didn't feel comfortable attending my own graduation. And I never told anybody this, but I ended up actually skipping my graduation at the time because I didn't get into med school. But now, with some distance from all of this, I do feel like I can talk a little bit more about it. To get sort of into what my mindset at the time was, I guess the first part that I really want to explain, and this might be helpful for a lot of students today, is things I learned about the education system. I think there's actually like two super important things I learned about the education system. I'm talking about it not from a student's perspective, but from like an administration perspective. Like, if you were the chancellor or if you were some admin responsible for a program or for a college/university, how you would go about things. Just going back into first principles, one thing that I learned that seems quite obvious now is that most programs are expected to have students on a normal distribution in terms of grades. What do I mean by that? It's pretty simple. Not everyone can get an A. Why? Because especially if you are a program that's trying to establish themselves, or a university or college trying to establish credibility, imagine if every single student got an A in that specific program or in a specific college. Then that degree loses a lot of credibility, right? Now, I know a lot of Ivy Leagues can avoid this because, well, they're Ivy Leagues, so they worry less about this. But in terms of programs, one simple first principle aspect is they really need to maintain this normal distribution. It means that the majority of people have an average grade, maybe like B or C, and then some people don't do well on this course, and some people do really well on this course. In practice, you wouldn't need to do anything to have a normal distribution, but we all know that that's not necessarily the case. I mean, this is just my theory, but this is something that I feel like definitely happens in a lot of programs. It's that one way I feel like programs try to create a normal distribution in terms of grades is they have courses that are essentially what I like to call GPA Graveyard Courses. What do I mean by GPA Graveyard? What I mean by that is that certain programs, in order to maintain students having a more normally distributed grade, they try to curve people by having some courses that are course room requirements that are incredibly, incredibly difficult. So that's one thing that they might do. Another thing that I realize is that some programs are just inherently more difficult. Like, there are just some fundamental differences. For example, if you are in chemical engineering, for the most part, it's going to be significantly more difficult than some of the other programs. Similarly, for computer science, nowadays it's very, very difficult. I also know some science programs, some specific science programs can be very, very hard as well. And I guess my point to all of this is that in Canada, med school is actually one of the hardest programs to get into, and they really care about your grades a lot. And I really didn't understand that some programs can be very difficult, and also some courses are these like GPA Graveyard Courses that can be very, very tough on your grades, which is important to get into med school. And stupidly, I went from a program that was in health sciences to a much more difficult program, neuroscience. Why was it much more difficult? Well, they only admit 30 students per year, and the academic average of those students is above 95% from high school. So again, think about trying to put 30 students who already have some of the top grades from high school on a normal distribution curve. You're going to have some GPA Graveyard Courses. You're going to have some situations where you're going to have to force some of these students who are already brilliant into a lower grade. Because of this whole neuroscience detour, I didn't make the cut for med school. And of course, there were some other reasons as well. A funny thing about all of this is that during my first semester in health sciences, I had perfect grades. I had all A's. And I actually got into this program called Scholars Academy. The quick rundown of Scholars Academy is supposed to be for like the top like 10 to 20 students in school. Like you have to do like interviews, things like that. We had like 10 to 15 Rhodes Scholars at the time in the history of our university. And the majority of them were in Scholars Academy. You had people who won like full entrance scholarships. We had people who like most of them went into med school. Most of them were like lawyers or did some like crazy or like went into like these crazy big industries, became founders, things like that. And I felt huge imposter syndrome because one thing about grades and programs is there are a certain category of people like my friend Daniel or like people from Scholars Academy where those students are just brilliant no matter what. If you're talking about a normal distribution, it doesn't matter how difficult the course is. Like my friends, those people were the people who are going to get A's no matter what. Like they don't care about these GPA Graveyard Courses because they're just so smart. For example, my friend Daniel, he got a perfect score on his GRE and he only studied for 2 weeks and then wrote a huge tutorial on Reddit about how it only took him 2 weeks to get a perfect score on his GRE. Those are the people who I was around, and I was feeling huge imposter syndrome because in actuality, I felt like I definitely didn't belong. Like, I don't want to say I didn't belong into that group, but I definitely was not the student who was going to get A pluses and A's super easily. I wasn't that type of student. I was a decent student, but it wasn't a particular given for me. And that's like the majority of us, right? And I tell my sister as well. My advice for that is that if you're trying to get into med school, if you're trying to get to a program that cares about grades a lot, is try to avoid these GPA graveyard courses because they're just going to make your life really difficult. Delay them if you can. And even if it is a course requirement, try to delay them as much as possible. Go on Rate My Prof, find the best professors if you have to take these courses, and just be prepared to put in full effort and be miserable throughout that semester to try and get the best grade you can for those courses. I didn't know any of those things, and I ended up not getting into med school. And I guess I say all of this to explain my mindset at the time. I felt huge imposter syndrome because I was part of this prestigious Scholars Academy group where everyone was absolutely brilliant. I ended up switching for whatever odd reason from health sciences, a program that I had perfect grades in, to a program that was like extremely difficult. I didn't know at the time, but it was actually quite difficult in terms of getting good grades. And then lastly, I didn't get into med school. So at that time, I felt like super down. I didn't know what to do. That was pretty much like for most pre-med people, that was pretty much like sort of the only path that you thought of at the time. There isn't sort of a plan B. I guess for most people, plan B is to go and do a PhD and things like that, which I also ended up doing. Like I went into a direct entry PhD after that. But now after some distance, looking back, it was super lucky for me because this failure set me on a path to where now I do coding for a living. I am building new things all the time. I'm able to create and build new things that a lot of people use. I am a part of the largest distributed system in the world in terms of architecture. And I also work for one of the biggest companies in the world. Beyond like sort of the work related things, we even got an outdoor basketball court at work this summer, which I go to all the time, which is great. Just reflecting on all of this, honestly, it reminds me of something that Steve Jobs said in a Stanford commencement speech. Basically, he said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. Reflecting on it now, everything makes sense. This failure really was something that helped catapult me to where I am today. But at the time, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was just so scared of what like the future held. If I knew how the education system worked back then, maybe I would have been less stressed and perhaps done better. I just have much better understanding and appreciation of how everything works and how it led me to where I am today. Funny enough, recently, I actually broke both of my elbows, both of my arms, and yeah, it was pretty bad. I ended up having to go to the ER, seeing ER physician, going into the orthopedic surgeon and seeing them. But going through that injury, I became entrenched in the ER department and in medicine all over again. And it gave me a chance to reflect because, I wasn't able to do anything anyways because of my broken elbows, and going to the hospital, being at the orthopedic surgeon practice, it gave me a lot of time to think about things that I had experienced early on in my life during undergrad. And it was funny, like I got to relive some of the things I experienced when I was younger. For example, being in a physician practice, orthopedic surgeon, where you're just like running between patients and trying to talk to them, but at the same time being cognizant of the time. In addition, I also volunteered in the ER department when I was an undergrad student, and it's kind of funny like how long you have to wait depending on the severity of your injury, and I got to experience that as well. But it also gave me a lot of clarity, which was I'm honestly not sure looking back now. And maybe this is one way to cope because I'm not like in med school now, but like I'm honestly not sure if I would have been happy as a doctor. Like the ER is super busy. Hospitals have ancient software. And one thing that I really enjoyed about medicine at the time was the fact that you could be more personable, that you could have this community driven interaction between people. But doctors are swamped. Like they are so busy. Like it doesn't matter which doctor. Like we have, like our healthcare system is just super limited, and you have limited time to talk to patients. And yeah, maybe this is just one way for me to cope that I didn't end up becoming a doctor. But honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that I would have enjoyed being a physician based on the current environment today. Okay, I guess the last part about all of this is what is this YouTube channel about and what is it going to be about going forward? If you've watched some of my YouTube videos, you'll know that I talk a lot about tech. I talk about my work as a software engineer, and then sometimes I also give tips about how to study better, things I've learned about the education system. In the long term, going into next year in 2025 and beyond, I really want this channel to engage with my community more. And the way I want to do that is by sharing cool projects that I'll be working on. For example, recently I used Claude to build this note-taking app, which I made a video about. And in the future, I would love to build more community-driven apps, build more projects that I can share with my YouTube community. And at the same time, also do fun vlogs and do fun sharing sessions about sort of my journey and sort of things that I think would be useful for young adults today. I realized what really initially drew me to medicine, and a huge appealing factor to all of that, was more about community building. And while I did not end up becoming a doctor, I believe that my current journey now as a software engineer and in tech will provide me with similar opportunities, and especially YouTube will help me slowly curate and build the community that I've always wanted. So I guess it is appropriate, similar to what Steve Jobs said, you can't really connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backward. So yeah, thanks for everyone who's already been a part of this community. And I can't wait to share with you guys what's next with the projects that I continue to work on that I will share via this YouTube channel.